out. Everybody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Lights Out. I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm your host, Austin.
And I'm the producer, Daniel.
Today we're covering a topic that all of us, I think, find very interesting.
This is top 3 episodes for researching for me that I've had the most fun researching.
Dude, I agree. Sleepwalking, for one, is just an interesting thing by itself.
Yes.
And it's something for thousands of years we've all been trying to figure out, like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What is this about? But then to add in the element of sleepwalkers that end up murdering people, it's a whole other can of worms.
And then trying to convince a jury that that is even possible.
That this person did not know what they were doing because they were still asleep when they brutally murdered usually their loved one too.
Yeah.
A partner, a child. I mean, it's such a bizarre thing that it's really hard to wrap your head around. And they still don't fully understand what's going on, why it happens. There's a lot of theories. There's obviously some science behind the sleep cycles and what's going on there. But how does one who has potentially been sleepwalking for a long time all of a sudden during an episode of sleepwalking just snap and then murder somebody?
Right.
And why?
Yeah. Often they don't have motives. They can't find motives for these crimes. Typically, you don't have to supply a motive, though, to convict someone. But that's the weirdest part. They're like, we have no idea why this person would do something like this in a lot of these cases. So we'll be covering a few this episode. I think we have 3 cases we'll go over and kind of break down, and then we'll get into the studies as well, just to try and wrap
sleepwalking in general.
Yeah, just to try and wrap our heads around what exactly is going on.
Yeah, this topic it's very interesting because I personally, as far as I know, I've never sleepwalked. Are you a sleepwalker?
As far as I know, no. I do. The most I've ever done while sleeping is I just clench my jaw. That's like the most, what they call like a parasomnia. That's the closest
You've never peed yourself?
Maybe when I was a little kid, yes. I definitely wet the bed like at least once. I remember, I think I was like 6 and I was so embarrassed.
Or to make noises? Like, do you ever sleep talk?
I've talked in my sleep, but not for a long, long while. I used to more when I was like in middle school and a teenager. I remember I would sleep talk, or like I would have a sleepover at a friend's and they'd be like, yeah, you were saying some weird stuff. But as far as I know, I haven't done that into adulthood.
Yeah, it's really wild. My brother was a sleepwalker. I don't know that he is anymore, but definitely when he was a child, he would get out of his bed. He almost would leave the house at times, so much so that my parents started putting a chair in front of the door.
Wow.
Because he knew how to get up, he knew how to get to the door, unlock it in his sleep. Because that's the interesting thing is people are actually far more capable than you would think when they're in that deep REM sleep.
They can interact with things.
Yeah. And like people go grocery shopping, drive a car
Cook
for
meals,
miles.
Yeah.
I learned so much in researching this episode. I'm like, this is far crazier than I ever expected.
That's nuts.
Danny, have you ever sleptwalked?
I haven't sleptwalked, but my brother sleptwalked once when I was a kid. My mom woke me up in the middle of the night because she was kind of confused what was going on too. And I'm sure you probably were around your brother when he was sleepwalking. It's kind of weird. They're in like a trance.
Scary. Yeah, it's kind of scary.
They're not responsive normally, and they're just kind of like, they'll look at you, but they don't see you. They look straight through you. It is kind of scary. It is. But we ended up just sending him right back to bed. He went back to bed and everything was fine.
Yeah, and like 99% of the time, it's not a big deal. I mean, tons of people. I know there's tons of viral TikToks of sleepwalkers that are pretty wild. When they go out, they literally leave the house and they're like walking dog down the street and stuff. But just this whole phenomenon is really wild. But specifically, what causes somebody to then escalate to this aggressive state where they proceed to murder somebody and oftentimes stab somebody multiple times? I mean, it's just like when there was no history of that sort of behavior before.
No. And no motive to do something like this.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to dive into today, which I'm very Yeah, I'm interested to hear if anybody out there has any experiences with sleepwalking personally. And I mean, hopefully nobody has any direct experiences with homicidal somnambulism. Let me say it again. Somnambulism is the scientific word, I believe, for sleepwalking.
Right. I only knew that because Gene Wolfe he likes to use all these crazy old antiquated.
Yeah, he's got all sorts of crazy stuff.
You probably heard from Ian over on Mile Higher, but yeah, I was like, he called someone a somnambulist, and I'm like, what is that?
I've never heard of that word before.
Yeah, it wasn't until I read a book, The New Sun, and I looked it up, and then I never forgot that because I thought it was such a cool word.
It is a cool word, though.
Yeah.
Somnambulism.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. One of the most bizarre sleepwalking murder cases in the U.S. happened in 1997 when Scott Falatar, a devout Mormon, stabbed his wife 44 times with a hunting knife. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This one just blew me away. So Scott and his family had been living the American dream. He worked as a product manager at Motorola Semiconductor plant and was a youth group teacher at the Mormon church. He lived in Phoenix, Arizona with his family, his wife, Yarmila, whom he called Yarm, who was his childhood sweetheart, and their 2 children. And I mean, you can probably just envision what him and his family were like. They went to church. They're a relatively quiet family, according to neighbors. But their lives would radically change on January 16th, 1997. At around 10 p.m. that night, Yarmila had fallen asleep watching ER in the living room. Scott had prepared a lesson plan for his Mormon religious education class, and then briefly worked on fixing an issue with their pool, but ended up just giving up. He had gotten the tools, which allegedly included a knife for removing the O-ring in the pool, and his work clothes from the trunk of his car, but had decided to delay work until the following day because he was just too tired, and it was dark out. We've all been there.
Yep.
And the knife thing obviously is a big component to this, but I know I've used probably much larger knives than I should have for
to remove something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Same.
We all have.
Yeah.
He then found his wife asleep on the couch. He kissed her goodnight and then went upstairs to bed. Hours passed and Scott claimed that a commotion outside woke him up and his dogs began barking. Local police entered his home and found Scott at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, acting confused and asking what was going on. Police had their guns aimed at him and ordered him to get on the floor. And obviously, in that type of situation, you're just going to comply. But he warned the other officers that there were 3 other people in the house, his 2 children and his wife. He was then placed under arrest, and when police started looking around, they found his wife's body floating in the blood-filled pool in their backyard. And apparently this was such a disturbing scene that they compared it to a shark attack.
So back in the interrogation room, he was told that he was a suspect in his wife's murder. He appeared confused. He said that he loved his wife and nothing had happened, and then he asked how she had died. So if you remember, when they arrested him, he said there are 3 other people in the house. And he mentioned his wife and his 2 children, right? So you kind of, we'll get into this a bit later, but just right off the bat, you're thinking, did he know what he was talking about? Was he genuinely confused? So that's kind of the question you have to ask going forward here. According to the investigation around 11 p.m. the night of, Scott and his wife were both in the backyard. It's unclear how they ended up there, but Scott wielded a hunting knife and began brutally attacking her. While he stabbed her 44 times, the next-door neighbor, Greg Coons, and his girlfriend could hear moaning noises, so they had looked over the fence. Seeing what was going on, Greg's girlfriend ended up calling emergency services, while Greg watched Scott hold his wife's head in the pool.
Essentially like drowning her.
Exactly.
Under the water.
So according to the investigation's timeline, the murder took about an hour to commit. The medical examination concluded that most of the 44 stab wounds were defensive wounds, but some were fatal. The neighbor also told police that Scott's actions seemed out of character, and they had never witnessed Scott and his wife arguing or fighting before. That's important to note.
Which, imagine being the neighbors and how shocked you would be
seeing
to
something
see
like
this
that.
play
Yeah.
out late at night too. Like, it's like,
Right.
What is going on?
Right. So when Detective Norman kept asking what set him off, Scott responded, quote, I loved her, been married all my adult life. She certainly didn't deserve to die. She was a good wife, great mother. So are my kids. And as the interrogation continued, Scott finally came to the realization that his wife was truly dead. You can kind of see like he's just confused about what's going on. And once it sets in that she's actually dead, he then leaned against the wall, tilted his head back, and began weeping. And then he covered his face with his hands. And this interrogation continued, and Scott continuously told Detective Norman that he had no memory of what had happened. And when Detective Norman asked him about the blood on Scott's neck, Scott wiped the blood off the back of his neck, confused, and said he didn't even know that he had blood on him. And this was in the interrogation room. He wipes the back of his neck. And he was like, huh. The interrogation continued for hours without going anywhere. Scott kept saying he had no recollection from that night. And as the investigation unfolded, many wondered, so why would a deeply religious, mild-mannered, sober, he's Mormon, right? He doesn't touch alcohol, financially stable, devoted husband and father stab his screaming wife to death in their backyard near the lighted swimming pool as their children slept in the house upstairs?
So many unusual things about that statement.
Really odd, right?
If somebody was going to do this and this was some type of premeditated murder or, in a fit of rage, they did this, and most of the time they wouldn't want to get caught. So why would they do it outside where everybody can hear and see?
Noises.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the lighted swimming pool. Then the neighbors do see, right?
Right.
That's who calls the police. All authorities could apparently find were minor tidbits of gossip, such as a comment Yarmila allegedly made to her friends about her marriage not being as ideal as outsiders might have perceived. Beyond that, why would Scott then drag his fatally wounded wife to the pool, hold her head underwater while the neighbor watched, right? Was he just completely unaware that the neighbor was there? So unfortunately, a lot of these questions might never have complete answers, but we will dive into kind of the investigation of what they uncovered.
But the circumstances are certainly important.
Yes, very odd.
And because typically you don't see this in these types of murder cases.
No.
After Scott was charged with first-degree murder, Scott's mother and sister confirmed that Scott had a history of violent sleepwalking incidents in his youth. Independent testing on a device called a polysomnograph also indicated that he fit the profile of a sleepwalker. So instead of an insanity defense, his attorney put together an argument for a sleepwalking defense. At the time of the murder, Scott had also been under severe stress at work, resulting in serious sleep deprivation, which experts say are common triggers for sleepwalking incidents. The defense planned on insisting that Scott unknowingly killed his wife. Psychiatrists in courtrooms call the defense, quote, non-insane automatism, a state where a person has no control over their actions and their behavior is quote unquote robotic. Sleepwalking is one form of non-insane automatism. The sleeper simply carries out a deeply embedded program.
And we'll get into this a bit later, but yeah, that's essentially how it was described by one of the doctors. It's like we just have these programs that we do, especially with routines that we do all the time, driving a car, going grocery shopping, cleaning, cooking. It's like these things that we've done a million times, we almost go into autopilot mode. And so, especially in this state, this non-insane automatism, we're just doing something we've typically done many times over.
But stabbing someone?
Yeah. Where does that come from?
Where does that come from? Because who's programmed to do that?
Right.
Courts have accepted this explanation in cases in the past where a sane person can commit a crime without intent, malice, or even awareness. But it's often hard to convince a jury because attorneys have to ride this fine line between criminal responsibility and, quote, legal insanity.
Essentially, you're saying my client did do this.
Yes.
But we're going to explain why they weren't even in control.
Right. In Scott's case, the sleepwalking defense gained national attention, and at first, even Scott thought a sleepwalking murder was a ridiculous concept. He even called it, quote, bullshit, pure and simple. But this was the only argument the defense had, and prosecutors in Maricopa County would be seeking the death penalty. As he considered the sleepwalking argument more, Scott said, quote, I thought my brain had thrown a rod, and I thought, I'm going to the state hospital or to prison for life. That was before I even knew that you can take drugs that can change your sleeping patterns at night. At that point, I was saying I'd accept a lifetime probation of living alone, let my kids sleep somewhere else, lock me up on my own because I don't want to hurt somebody else. Later, he said, quote, "Sometimes when I think about this, I wonder, what kind of Jekyll and Hyde am I? There's no way I could hurt Yarm. I didn't know that something like that could be in anybody I've ever known, much less me." And he continued to deny having any recollection of events from that night. Scott's trial began in May 1999, and his lawyer, Michael Kimmerer, argued that Scott had lived an almost quote-unquote perfect life with a happy, loving family and had absolutely no motive for the murder. This episode is also brought to you by Helix Sleep, and they're running an awesome sale right now, so it's perfect time to upgrade your mattress. Just head over to helixsleep.com/lightsout for more info. I am a huge fan of Helix Sleep. They were nice enough to send me new mattresses for my home for everybody, including children's mattresses. But I can't say enough good things about Helix, so much so that I literally have gotten them for all my friends and my family. Actually, Helix was nice enough to get my mother-in-law a new mattress after hers got kind of dirty from the recent hurricanes, and she just got it and she absolutely loves it. She actually slept in my guest bed, which is a Helix mattress. It's the Midnight Luxe, and she loved it so much. She was like begging me. She's like, "How do I get my hands on one of these? I need a new mattress." And Helix was nice enough to send her one, and she loves it so far. I love Helix. You will too. Again, they have mattresses for everybody, all types of sleepers. They have a sleep quiz. You know, some people are skeptical about buying a mattress online, which I get. You want to try it out before you buy it, but Helix makes it so simple. You just go through the quiz and they match you up with the mattress they think they'll be best for you. And they have mattresses at all price points, which is great. They have their award-winning Luxe version and ultra premium elite collections as well. They're designed for big and tall sleepers. And like I mentioned, they have a Helix Kids mattress as well. The best part about Helix though is that they'll deliver your mattress right to your door with free shipping in the US. It comes rolled up in a box. It's super easy to set up yourself. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the unboxing process, setting it up. It really is that easy. It's amazing that they're able to stuff these massive mattresses into a box at all. But if it makes you nervous to buy something online that you haven't tried, Helix has a 100-night sleep trial so that you can get more than 3 months to make sure that you love it. I'm personally a back sleeper, kind of side sleeper, but again, they make a mattress for everybody. The one that I love is the Midnight Luxe. Highly recommend it. And right now, Helix is running their President's Sale, and it's only running for a limited time. They're offering our listeners here at Lights Out an exclusive discount this month, 27% off your mattress purchase. So a really great deal. They also have sheets, they have pillows, they have bed frames. They got you covered all the way around when it comes to elevating your sleep. So check it out today, helixsleep.com/lightsout.
But prosecutor Juan Martinez, by law, did not have to provide a motive for the murder. All he had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt was that Scott planned to kill Jarmila and then committed the murder. So without a convincing motive, prosecutor Martinez developed a theory that Scott had become estranged from his wife because he wanted more children, but she had not, and also because he wanted her to be more involved in the church, but she was unhappy in the Mormon faith. They had both converted after being raised Catholic. So according to the prosecutors, Jarmila was found in the pool without her wedding ring, which that it could be a sign, it could be indicative of maybe a failing marriage, but also if you're going to bed, sometimes people take off their jewelry. It was late at night, so who's to say? But here's a really interesting piece of this case. According to their son, Michael, he said, quote, "I had a father that worked hard and supported the family and a stay-at-home mom who was always there when I came home from school. I never saw my parents argue or fight or yell at each other. It was a very loving home." I think that right there makes this the biggest head scratcher ever.
Why would their child lie too?
Right. He's 12.
Most of the times it's opposite. They're spilling the beans like, oh, actually, nobody else outside the house saw it, but at home they went at it.
Right.
And there's none of that here.
Right. And considering this, Michael had just lost his mother. So to put that into place here, That seems like that would have been the prosecution's ace in the hole had the children been like, no, it was actually awful there. But he said the exact opposite. So the defense brought several sleep experts forward. Dr. Rosalind Cartwright, an expert from Chicago, had examined Scott during 4 nights of sleep, done experiments with others, and claimed it was possible to be aggressive during a sleepwalking episode. She thought Scott's case was a textbook example of a sleepwalking disorder. She believed it was entirely possible that in his sleep, Scott was going through some routine, such as cleaning the pool or fixing a faulty pump, which he had allegedly been doing that night before, and Jarmila had gone out to get him to stop and come back in. His brain, interrupted, went into a state of alarm, and he attacked her with the knife that he was holding, which he was apparently prying off the O-ring or something like that to the pool. But he might have not been conscious through any of it. That is the theory that Dr. Rosalind Carter was proposing, that to piece together what had occurred before the actual murder, what was his state of mind like and what was he doing? So she was proposing that he was in this routine of possibly going back to the pool to fix it. Jarmila was like, hey, what are you doing out here in the middle of the night? Then something escalated while he was still asleep.
Yeah, and we have no idea if he recognized her or even knew who it was.
Yeah.
Or what, while he's, in dreaming, essentially, what he thought was approaching him. So, and how do you even figure that out? There's no way to figure that out.
Or he did recognize her and he's like, this is just a dream.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, the prosecutor wasn't having any of it at all. He was just like, this is just nonsense. To his point, he pointed out that Scott had deliberately tried to hide the evidence of the crime. The investigation had found items in Scott's car: clothing, the knife, the murder weapon, and all the items that would indicate that he committed a crime. He had also washed the blood off of himself, treated a wound on his finger, and changed his clothes. So some have also proposed a theory that Scott was sleepwalking when he stabbed his wife, but then woke up and realized what he'd done, and in a panic, he might have finished the murder by holding Jarmila underwater and then cleaned up everything. Which,
possible.
I don't know, though.
Improbable, but
why would
possible.
you do that? You know that's going to make it look bad for yourself.
I don't buy that theory either.
But I can see why they're trying this different angle. On cross-examination, sleep expert Dr. Roger Broughton, who worked at the Sleep Disorder Center in Ottawa and founded the Canadian Sleep Society in 1986, acknowledged it was unusual for a sleepwalker to carry out so many actions during a single episode. Because I think
that's fair.
Most of us are like, there is a lot of steps to this.
Yeah.
And he really did all this while still asleep.
Right. So we're considering the stabbing, the dragging to the pool, the drowning, then going and cleaning yourself up, taking your clothes off, putting your gear back in the car, and then bandaging a wound. That's a lot of stuff.
Well, and a lot of people point out when his wife is screaming, it didn't wake him up.
Yeah.
At what point did he actually wake up, or did he not at all? I mean,
yeah,
that's a tough part to prove, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prosecutor Juan Martinez's main argument was that Scott's actions were too deliberate for him to have been sleeping. And jurors soon became overwhelmed at the number of sleep experts that were brought in to testify. One of the prominent experts, as we mentioned, Dr. Broughton, admitted that to do as many specific and complicated actions as Scott had was unusual, including committing a violent crime, hiding the evidence, and changing his clothes. Because it seems to insinuate that at some point he realized what he had done was wrong. Mm-hmm. But could have that still been in that sleepwalking state?
So here's my idea. If he's still in this like routine to go fix the pool, if he's doing something and he has the tool, which allegedly is this knife that he was trying to pop an O-ring off, so he's going to the pool, then is a part of that routine to then, he might be a little bit dirty from the work, so he's going to go shower, and then he's going to return his work clothes and his tools to the location in his car. Like that would be a part of the routine of him fixing the pool. And it just so happened that there was this crazy, horrific murder in between the routine. I don't know.
It feels far-fetched, right?
Very, very far-fetched.
But if he was awake and he was trying to cover up the crime or hide evidence, you would have thought he would have wiped the blood off, make sure to get all the blood off of him. But he didn't, remember? He's in interrogation. He's still got blood on the back of his neck.
Yeah. You think you couldn't miss that too if you go and like shower. So that also makes me think, if you just committed a murder, wouldn't you be like hyper paranoid if you had like any more blood on you to make sure you wipe it all off? So,
which I guess some would argue it all happened so fast that maybe he just missed. But yeah, this one's really, I mean, there's so many different ways to look at it.
Yeah.
Dr. Broughton, along with Dr. Rosalind Cartwright, concluded that it was entirely possible Scott committed the murder while sleepwalking. So they're bringing all these experts in, and they're all making the argument that it is very possible all of these events happened while he was still asleep.
They're admitting, like Dr. Broughton said, unlikely that you can do all this, but possible.
Yeah, which there is no way to fully prove this at all.
Yeah, how could you?
Unless he was hooked up to monitors the entire time and they were monitoring his brainwaves.
Yeah.
So they're going off of past experience with other sleepwalkers.
Yep. So towards the end of the trial, Scott Falatar took the stand, and through tears, he declared how much he loved his wife and how he didn't know what he was going to do without her. He called Jarmila, quote, virtually all of my emotional life. And he said, quote, there was no way I could do that, not intentionally. I loved her. I don't know what I would do without her. He also admitted, because the prosecution brought this theory forward, he admitted that Jarmila had wanted to be less involved with the church than he had, and she had not wanted more children, but he had respected her decisions. Jurors, in the end, were split on whether or not the testimony seemed genuine, but after deliberating for 8 hours on June 23rd, 1999, the jury found Scott Falatar guilty of first-degree murder. Some jurors later said they had been swayed by issues like why Jarmila's screams, like Josh said, had not woken him up, and why he had been using a hunting knife to fix the pool.
This is a big blade, too. This isn't just like a little pocket knife.
Yeah.
Like normally if I'm doing stuff, I'm not using a hunting blade.
True, yeah.
That's for skinning an animal.
True.
Because that'd just be dangerous to. So, but maybe it's something that he did on a normal basis, but it is strange. And I don't fault the jury.
No, me neither.
In this case, because I think there's enough doubt there that this could have been, a murder.
Yeah.
But the motive is weak.
I could totally see this being a sleepwalking case. It's really, really hard to believe, though. So I don't know if you were a juror, I don't know how you would go in there and start deliberating and I don't know what would be so convincing that you're like, yeah, this guy definitely would be, other than the sleepwalking experts. That's basically is what this case is hinged upon, is that you're bringing in these experts who know a lot about neuroscience. But at the end of the day, they're just saying that it's possible. We can't confirm that this actually was the case, but we're just here saying this is possible.
Based on our credentials and our experience.
And it's even unlikely. They're even saying it's unlikely, it is possible. So it's that's really tough to go on something like that.
But it is a bit surprising they got a unanimous decision to find him guilty.
True.
In this, because I don't know that there's enough there too to.
Beyond
I don't know
a
if it would
reasonable
convince
doubt.
me. Again, I wasn't there, and maybe there's more evidence and stuff that they saw that might convince me otherwise. But it seems tough because it's then what was the motive? The motive that the prosecutor presented is feasible, I guess. I mean, people murder people for far less, but considering all the circumstances, the timing, where it was, the fact that the neighbors were right there,
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No.
And the fact, Michael's testimony where he's like, no, I came from a loving family. Never once saw my parents fight.
What's even more interesting, too, is that Scott's 2 children pleaded for their father's life since he was potentially up for the death penalty. And I think largely in part because of this, the judge decided against capital punishment.
Yeah.
And he was sentenced to life in prison, which I think, at the very least, because there's
so much gray area here where it's
because what if he really was
right? So I think that was a good call to at least just do life in prison here. But
regardless if he was guilty or not, he still is capable of committing that crime in his sleep. So there still is a danger there potentially.
Right.
Either way, he is a danger to the people around him.
Right.
So,
and even he will like admit that. And he does. We'll get to it later. But yeah, that's a big point with like the doctors that critique this defense is that if you just say, okay, yeah, he is not guilty by non-insane automatism defense, there's no repercussion. We can't even mandatory like a sleep treatment or anything like that. We can't even put him. He kind of just goes free. So yeah, to your point, it's like, oh, we're just letting him go, yet he still might have this potential problem in the future. And if you remember, he was quoted saying like, just take me away, don't let me sleep near my children ever again, stuff like that. So even he was aware like, wow, I can't believe that I'm this much of a danger to those around me. But, in the end, his sleepwalking defense had failed, and many scrutinized the argument as a quote unquote Twinkie defense, which you kind of hear sometimes in true crime, meaning that sleepwalking was an unconventional and improbable legal defense. But Scott's case is still argued to this day.
It's kind of in the same wheelhouse as The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yeah, it's like
Although I think this has far more science probably.
A bit more convincing because we actually have neuroscientists coming in and sleep doctors that can come in and at least vouch for something like this. So, I mean, it is interesting. They're saying it's possible. Even that alone is kind of mind-blowing that the experts were coming in and be like, this is totally possible for someone to sleepwalk and commit this crime. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
That's terrifying.
Makes you... Yeah, if you're dating or, you meet somebody new, maybe ask them if they're a sleepwalker.
Yeah.
Because, do you have a history of sleepwalking? Should be added to the dating questions.
Yeah.
Because
unload my gun and store it.
Well, and that's the
other
other interesting thing, too, is the access to weapons.
Yes, which is a big factor in these.
Makes this rate go up much higher of something violent happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's so torn.
I know, me too. And
I just don't feel like based on what, again, there could be something they didn't uncover, conversations that were had that they weren't able to dig up any info on that would give us more of a motive here. I just feel like it just seems all very random and just kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it is like, we'll admit, it's very odd. Why is he fixing the pool with a knife? How come he wasn't woken up by the screaming? Why was he storing his clothes that he had worn to commit the murder in the car along with the murder weapon? Was he trying to hide them? Because that seems odd. But if you look at the pictures of where those items are found, it doesn't really seem like he was like hiding them. I mean, it looked more like he was just storing them there.
Well, if he was going to hide them, wouldn't he hide them somewhere better?
Right.
Throw them in a dumpster or take them down the block or something.
Right.
That's the thing too, is that as sketchy as it seems those events were, if he really was going to try to cover this up or spin it a certain way, you would have thought not only would he have done different things with the murder weapon and the clothing, but also what he would have said to investigators. He might have said a bit more that would have, rather than be like, I don't know what happened, you know what I mean? Which, again, criminals do all the time. They're like, I don't know, just play dumb. But
sure,
if you were truly going to try to spin this in a way of, I feel like he would have said some different things, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I keep thinking, I'm like, the screaming part of it is really what trips me up. But I'm like, well, if you're in a deep enough sleep to sleepwalk in the first place, there might be a good chance that you're not going to respond to that sort of sound. Because like, what if people sleepwalk and drive their cars, and
you're not getting
if you leave your car radio on and you get in the car and there's radio playing, if it's just something, if it's a loud noise, like
I feel like just even the engine turning on would wake me up. Yeah, there's plenty of
slamming
stuff.
the front door behind
right.
you would think that any one of those sounds might wake you up, but if you're that deep of a sleep, I feel like it's possible.
I had a family friend who their railroad tracks were like from the back of their house. We're talking like not even 50 feet to a railroad track. That whole family slept through trains going by all the time. So I think, I don't know, sometimes sound doesn't really wake people up like you think it would.
Yeah. I feel like all of us personally could probably name instances where we slept super, super deep, and then maybe our partner didn't.
Yeah.
Like Kendall says to me all the time, I'm surprised you didn't hear me wake up, because she went in the bathroom, the toilet's not far from her bed, and she was puking.
Oh man.
And she does this, she gets sick sometimes, and so she's always asked me the next day, she's like, did you hear me get up? I'm like, no.
Not a thing.
No, I was out the entire, I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah.
And given I have a fan going and like other noise, we have like a noise machine, but still like getting up and flushing the toilet and stuff like that, people sleep right through it.
Yep.
So I think it's possible.
That's the crazy part. It's possible
that this could have happened the way that the defense said it was. But I see why the other side ended where they did. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Live Good. These days, we all take supplements, or at least we know we should be, right? But why are so many supplement companies charging ridiculous prices for products that really aren't that special? It's frustrating and frankly unacceptable. That's why we want to introduce you to Live Good, a brand that's turning the supplement industry on its head. Live Good believes that everyone deserves access to high-quality supplements without the insane markups. They offer premium products formulated by an industry-leading team of natural health experts, and they cut out the middleman to sell them at the lowest prices anywhere. Austin and I got sent some products from them that we've been using for over a month now, and honestly, I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah.
I think the ingredients are top-notch. They're very transparent about where they come from, and they're high quality, because there's a lot of supplement companies out there that, you know, jazz you up other ways, right? Through their branding, or, you know, sell you the sun, moon, and stars, but ultimately the ingredients are no good, or they're very low quality.
What have you been taking?
Super Reds.
Same, actually. I got the
same thing. Did you get Super Reds too? Hell
yeah.
Super Reds is really good stuff. I mean, as we are aging, you know, we need all the blood flow we can get.
Yes. To certain areas.
My feet, my hands.
Yeah.
You know,
I've been throwing it because I also do the collagen peptides, and I just throw all the powder in my smoothies that I make every day. So
that's a great way to take supplements. Just make yourself a smoothie in there. You got breakfast taken care of, and then you got all your supplements in there as well.
Yep.
Yeah, the Super Reds is really good stuff. It's great for circulation, you know, sexual health, cognitive function.
Lord knows I need that.
Need some help up here.
Yeah.
But they've got a wide range of different stuff, from nootropics to creatine to just multivitamin gummies. They even have some more obscure stuff, Himalayan shilajit and organic sea moss, which I know there's a lot of benefits to that. Supports nervous system and brain function, hormone balance, thyroid support, boosts sexual health and fertility, chlorophyll drops even. Basically anything supplement wise.
Yeah.
Live Good's got you covered.
And we both got a little handwritten note from the CEO. It seems like a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Nice fella.
Shout out Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're ready to make the switch and start saving, we'll make it even easier for you. Use our link and you can save an additional 10% off your first order on top of the already lowest prices. Just go to livegood.com/lightsout to save 10% on your first order. That's livegood.com/lightsout. Don't miss out on this opportunity to invest in your health without overspending. Scott is currently incarcerated at Yuma Prison. He practices meditation, he gets plenty of sleep, and he's gotten letters from other sleepwalkers. And he said he encourages anyone with a sleep disorder to get treatment, which is great. I'm glad he's advocating for that.
Yeah.
You never know. Like, you should probably get it checked out, and there are treatments for people with sleep disorders. So he also claims he still cannot recall the events of that night, but he said, quote, "There's no one else I can place the responsibility on. It's on my shoulders, and I accept that, and I have to move on." He hopes to reunite with his wife in heaven, saying, quote, "She knows more than I do about what happened that night, and she will actually know how I've conducted myself since then. I want to be sure that I'm still worthy of her by how I carry myself now." He's also expressed how he will never forgive himself, which, yeah,
that's a lot to carry.
It is.
Especially if you truly believed he was sleepwalking. I don't know how I would live with myself after something like that.
I don't know either. That'd be very, very difficult. But we actually found a short clip from a 2020 interview he did. We'll play that for you now.
Do you believe your wife has forgiven you?
I think about what she had to go through that night, and the pain and the terror she had to feel. I can't even fathom. So, but I believe that she would be willing to be more understanding and forgiving of me than I feel right now about myself.
God, he doesn't sound like a guilty man to me.
And what he said, I think we can all be like,
it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
I think he's innocent.
Yeah.
That seemed very genuine.
Yeah. It's just, how do you convince a jury of this?
Right.
I think that is the big question. It's like, how do you actually convince people something that seems like you just can't even really find the data point for at the end of the day? You can bring in all the sleep experts you want, but like you said, he wasn't hooked up to a machine that could read what he was doing that night. It's just like, to our best ability, it's possible. And how else do we prove it?
Well, I think the violent nature of this too plays into it.
Definitely. 44 times. Yeah.
I mean, a jury is seeing this or hearing this, and obviously they have the prosecutor that's going for the death penalty in this case, and painting him out a totally different way. So how split you would be. And it'd be really interesting to talk to somebody on that jury.
Seriously.
And you get their thought process behind it, because it must have been very difficult because at the same time you want to do right by the victim. You want to do right by Yarmila, sorry.
Yeah.
It must have been really difficult, because from the jury's perspective, you want to do right by Yarmila and get justice if you believe that this was a murder, this was a cold, calculated murder, or whether or not it was a random act of violence. I mean, she died brutally, and as you just heard from him, he's like, the terror she must have felt. So I see it from that perspective too, because there's almost more evidence backing up that this was a murder than there is that this was sleepwalking. And I think you have to really evaluate that in your mind. You're like, it could be this. These experts are saying it's possible, but I don't have anything else to go off of other than it's possible.
Yeah.
Versus on the other side, there's a knife. There's, the wiping off the clothes and the fact that he held her head under the water, which is all very bizarre and strange, like to go the extra step. And just, if you have a sleep expert saying it's possible, but yet it's rare to do all of these events in succession.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is that enough for reasonable doubt though?
Right. Is it enough? But then to throw a wrench in it, you have their children that are supporting their father throughout his trial and sentencing.
And to this day.
Yep. Scott has also said that he has been in touch with his kids over the years, and he said, "I will go to my grave extremely proud of both of them." So we have a clip of his son, Michael, who was 12 years old at the time of the murder. Let's hear from him.
In the 20 plus years since I've lost my mom, I think about her every day. I think about what she could be doing with my kids now, what life could have been like, and things that I've missed out on.
God, that's just so brutal.
Yeah. How do you even deal with that? How do you even begin to process that?
I have no idea.
But I think, if anybody knows their father best, it's his kids, right?
Sure.
So hearing them say that, I agree with you, Dan.
Yeah.
Like,
it's pretty convincing.
I'd say I'm like 70% leaning towards sleepwalking, 30% that this was. And I want to leave a little bit. I'm not higher than that, because I think there's just enough that we don't know.
But we can agree there's enough for reasonable doubt.
1,000%. I don't know that I could come to a unanimous decision that he's guilty of murder here, especially first degree murder.
Right.
Life in prison.
Yeah, that's crazy. Almost the death penalty.
Yeah.
Except the judge put a stop to it. That's wild.
That is wild.
And I wonder maybe is that indicative of who were the jurors? Is that indicative of, and I'm not trying to slam any state, is that indicative of Arizona?
Especially Maricopa County, man.
Yeah.
So the sheriff for a long time down there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Scary guy.
Yeah. So maybe that's a bit.
They're kind of known for going
really hard on
definitely.
crime.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if we had a different location and a different jury, this might have been completely different, is my opinion. But tough to say. So if you're still listening and you're still like, what the hell is going on? We're going to start breaking down the sleepwalking defense a little bit here, because there is a lot to unpack. And I tried to condense as much information down in a palatable way so you don't get a little sleepy on us through the study portion of the show. But
it's important to know.
Especially addressing, this is such a unique defense that really, I don't think we've ever come across this in any of our other episodes. I mean, across the shows, have you ever come across? I know Kendall has covered one, right?
No.
But these are really rare. So is the sleepwalking defense a legitimate defense? Let's dive in a little bit, starting with parasomnias, which I like the name just because it sounds like paranormal. But a parasomnia, it's the catch-all term coined in 1932 for sleep behaviors and experiences. It's derived from Greek and Latin, meaning alongside sleep. So this is essentially just our collection of sleep disorders characterized by abnormal actions or events that occur during sleep.
I do some weird stuff.
Yeah. So like grinding your teeth. I think Daniel was saying earlier, he grinds his teeth. I clench my jaw. That's technically a parasomnia. We're not supposed to be doing that.
What about just sleeping on your extremities?
Huh.
Because when you're awake, you never just lay on top of your arm.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
But then when you're asleep, I'll put myself in a pretzel position and I'll wake up and I feel like all my limbs were amputated and I start freaking out.
Yeah.
Or usually it's one arm and I'll be like this in my bed, holding my other arm, praying the blood comes back to it. Or I'll be scared. I'll be like, I'm gonna have to get my arm amputated. What am I gonna do?
That is such a weird feeling, though, the tingling sensation of when the blood comes back in. Yeah.
I've had both arms one time.
Really?
I felt so helpless. I think I rolled out of bed onto the floor to try to get up on my knees so that I could. But I'm like, why did I go into that position in the first place while I'm sleeping? And was there something that I was dreaming that potentially put me in that position? Or did I just roll over from my back to my stomach to get comfortable or something and then fell on top of my limbs?
Right.
But because I was still sleeping.
There could be.
It's weird. I don't know. I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm going to start strapping myself down. Like,
just get a straight
handcuff
jacket.
me. Yeah, straight jacket.
So the SFA, which we'll be quoting a bit through this, is the Sleep Forensics Associates out of Minneapolis. And they characterize parasomnias as, quote, disruptive events that occur while entering into sleep, while sleeping, during arousal from sleep, when the central nervous system activates the skeletal, muscular, and or nervous systems in an undesirable manner. So to your point, I think that would be under the umbrella
I agree.
Parasomnia.
Not only that, but one I definitely have experience that is a parasomnia is night terrors.
Night terrors, that's a huge one. I know. I haven't had a night terror in a long time. Like I haven't woke up screaming or anything like that in many years. But yeah, that's one.
I used to think demonic entities were descending from my ceiling.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah,
and one time I woke up thinking that my apartment was being shot at.
Damn.
Like I woke up, pop. I jumped out of bed, like from a deep sleep, jumped out of bed, went to the window and was like peering out the window. And I scared the shit out of Kendall. I was like, there's gunshots. I just heard gunshots. And she was so fucking crazy. She's like, that was one of the scariest fucking nights. Cause I was like, what are you talking about?
That's terrifying. Yeah.
Or then the other time was I woke up and I was like, oh my God, do you see that? See the black thing descending from the ceiling? And I woke her up too. And I was freaked the fuck out.
Yeah.
Sleep terrors.
There you go.
But and we'll get into the science behind it, but I was under extreme stress during that time of my life.
For sure.
Very stressed out with school and work and, I was a struggling college kid. And so, and then I was also deconstructing from Christianity at the time.
Fun
times.
Been there.
And and my relationship with my parents was horrible. So I had
Yeah, a
all
lot
these
of stress.
factors. So my stress was on a whole other level.
If you remember in Scott's case, they mentioned stress-induced factors, and then which lead to like sleep deprivation. You're not really getting that much sleep. That can contribute towards, in his case, sleepwalking. But yeah, that'll we'll dive into like how the hell do we get into parasomnias, especially sleepwalking. But yeah, I think stress can do a bunch of weird crap to us.
Stress is the devil, man.
It really is. I think it's like the worst, quote unquote disease you can have is stress.
Got to meditate more.
Got to meditate. We need to find our centers. So after this episode, we're going to
lead you in a group meditation.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
And then we're all going to lay down on our cots and take a nap.
Yeah, there we go. So the Sleep Forensics Associates, like I said, we're just going to be calling the SFA going forward, is a group of medical and legal consultants who review cases of extreme parasomnias and previously indescribable human behaviors arising from sleep. Formed in 2006, lawyers and law enforcement officials have turned to this group when investigating crimes that may be explained by a sleep problem. And according to SFA, clinical research regarding sleep-related behaviors are impractical and ethically problematic because recruiting study participants would be extremely difficult. If you can imagine, I don't even think you could get, reasonable study results from this if you like get people together. How do you even like study that they become violent? You're like putting them in a little test chamber and like leaving a baseball bat near them or something. Like, it just seems like they said
a dummy in there or something.
Yeah. But like they said, it just seems ethically problematic, right? Just putting people in these weird sleep situations. So they've taken an ethological behaviorist research approach, or in other words, their approach is more like animal behavior researchers who just study primates in the wild, hoping to learn which behaviors are genetically determined and which are conscious control. So parasomnias include things like sleepwalking, sleep driving, sleep talking, nightmares, sleep terrors, sleep-related eating disorders, sleep paralysis, REM sleep behavior disorder, which is kicking, yelling, or grabbing, or other actions often associated with a violent dream, and bruxism, or grinding and clenching your teeth, which that's what I have.
Which seems like all three of us.
Yeah, it seems like we all have parasomnia.
He's got sleep paralysis history.
Yeah.
You're clenching your teeth.
Yep.
I'm screaming at demons on the ceiling.
But yeah, so I think it's also, they throw a few more in that list, so you could look up a full list. There's plenty more. But as for sleepwalking specifically, which is kind of what we're going to focus on here, according to the Mayo Clinic, somnambulism is a disorder of arousal that occurs during N3 sleep, which is the deepest stage of non-rapid eye movement sleep. 2 studies report that either 4% of adults or less than 1.5% of adults have sleepwalking experiences. So not many. That's really rare. Very rare.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is what makes these cases even crazier, because if it's already that small of a pool, and then we'll get into it, even smaller are violent. We're talking about like such niche.
A percentage of a percent.
Yes, it's very small. So according to Dr. Michelle Kramer-Bornemann from SFA, only a small percentage would turn violent. Location and access to a weapon, as we said earlier, are key factors. He said, quote, by and large, criminal allegations seen with forensic implications are associated with close proximity. For the vast majority of cases, violence occurs in instances where the victim just happens to be within arm's length. So that's also important.
Yeah, which is interesting because I don't think there's been a case, as far as we know, where somebody has like gotten a hunting rifle out and then went out into the streets and started shooting at people.
Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Randomly? No.
Or none of the any sort of mass shooter event. This hasn't cropped up.
No.
But
no. Not that I've ever
arm's length.
Yeah. So if you sleepwalk, they say it's advised to remove potential weapons from your bedroom or house. And according to the SFA, the potential forensic implications for sleepwalking include DUIs, motor vehicle accidents, sexual assault, and sleep-related violence or murder. I did find an opposing French study of sleepwalkers in 2013 where 58% of the 140 adult sleepwalkers studied displayed violent behavior during their sleep, with 31% of violent incidents being towards themselves and 46% toward their partner sleeping next to them. But I mean, that also does go in tandem with Dr. Borneman's statement where it's proximity.
Yeah.
Right? So if your partner's right next to you, or if, people are trying to wake other people up from sleepwalking, typically you're very close to them. You might even be shaking them or something like that. The study also found that those who started sleepwalking at a young age had a higher frequency of violent behaviors causing injuries, and that sleep terrors often accompanied violent behavior during sleep.
I just wanted to chime in really fast. I'm sure we've all heard the myth about how you're not supposed to wake a sleepwalker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the myth is saying that it's going to cause them some form of like medical issue, like a heart attack or something. Like I'm sure as kids, you were probably told, Josh, that if you wake your brother up, something bad's going to happen to him, right? And it's going to be bad for his health.
I just yell at him.
From across the room.
Yeah. Joel, what are you doing?
I'm here to debunk that myth. It's not true. You can wake someone who's sleepwalking. The only danger with it is that they might be in a frightened state when you do wake them up due to confusion. Because they don't know why they're there. And that's where that danger can come from, is because they're going to wake up in a fight or flight mode.
Right.
So it's not usually recommended to wake someone up who is sleepwalking. Just if you can, guide them back to their bed and they'll go to sleep. You only should wake them up if they're, potentially going to cause harm to themselves or others.
Or just put a bunch of Legos on the ground before they walk. Well, the chair thing kind of worked too, because he would walk into the chair. And that was enough to kind of make him fall. Like he would fall to the ground sometimes.
And it's kind of funny just imagining it like that.
I know. Better than leaving.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, okay, he's back. Because I think sometimes, I don't think my parents would always wake up. And I think sometimes he would literally wake himself up from running into the chair or tripping over the stairs or something, and then come and just be like, oh, back in the bed, and be like, where'd you go, dude?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, that is interesting. Obviously, like if someone's going to like start a fire or they're doing something, you want to wake them up. But then I am considering, in these weird niche cases where, like they said in Scott's case, if he was potentially wielding a knife while sleeping, maybe that would be a circumstance where you wouldn't want to try and wake them up, because it's like, I don't even know what to do here. He's sleepwalking with a knife in his hand. That was at least proposed, like allegedly that was what one of the sleep doctors was saying was one of the scenarios that could have taken place there. And then,
but everybody has a knife. Everybody has access to a knife
inside their home. Yeah, kitchen knives. Yeah, they're all over the place.
So was it just the fact that he was working on the pool before, and that was still programmed, and it's just like,
that's the idea.
We'll pick up where we left off here in 3 hours when I'm asleep, and
that's the idea, is that he knew he had to go do that. So that's why he's
using a freaking hunting knife.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. We'll see, like in a later case, towards the end, where it's another circumstance of like, we don't actually know what proceeded immediately before the murders, but it might have been another case where it's like, he's not supposed to be here. He might have a knife, or someone, there's a knife nearby or something like that. But I don't know, this whole thing, there are questions that I don't think we'll get the answer to, because sleep and dreams are almost nonsensical at times. And it's just hard to pin down exactly what to do in any given situation.
How the hell are people sleep driving
and
then
crazy.
Going to the grocery store?
Yeah. That happens.
If that's all that you did, maybe day in, day out, but like, wow.
Yeah.
If only there was a way to train ourselves to get shit done while we slept. Clean your house.
If I could go walk
safely.
Jerry, and then like while I'm sleeping, I will wake up the next day like, man, I'm refreshed.
What happens if you get mugged on your walk? Then what?
Here you go, sir.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, this is your dog? My bad.
Yeah, Jerry's
you
gone.
just take him to somebody else's house?
God. Yeah.
There's so much liability there.
Right.
We had to get like sleep insurance.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, what we really need, it's a good reminder. If you have sleep disorders, go get them treated. I think that's maybe the bottom line here, is go see a professional and stop sleepwalking is really, I think, maybe the number one thing here.
Because they will do a sleep study on you. Your PCP will order a sleep study for you. And then you can actually go see. And then you might, a lot of us have sleep apnea. We have no idea.
That's true. Yeah, my brother had sleep apnea for a long time.
Yeah. I think I have it too, but I won't do the sleep study. I need to.
Josh needs a CPAP.
No, that's what I don't want. You need a mouth guard, probably.
I probably need a mouth guard from the clenching. Sometimes I wake up and the whole left side of my jaw is like really in pain, and then I'll eat and I'll be like, damn, do I
Get a grind guard.
Yeah, I probably should.
Get a grind guard.
It's always on my left side too.
Do you sleep on your side?
I do typically.
Which side do you sleep on?
It depends. So yeah, I usually go back and forth, but it seems like I always clench my left side.
Fair.
At least I'm not up and walking though, because then I'd be very concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not walking either. Things just go, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah. This year, there's nothing holding you back from loving your hair again. Hair is so much more than what you see on the surface. It's a reflection of what's happening inside. You know that, Josh? Let Nutrafol target the key root causes of your thinning hair and help you grow stronger, healthier strands from within. Yeah, I notice I just kind of destroy, I thin out my hair sometimes, and I gotta keep it natural, keep it thick, you know? I gotta do it. So Nutrafol, it's helping me out a little bit. It's the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
Yeah, Kendall's been on Nutrafol for
I
years.
remember you saying that.
So I've watched it work firsthand for a long, long time. And it's amazing the results. I mean, she swears by it and has been taking it, religiously for a long time. And she's definitely seen improved hair growth and decreased shedding. So
it's not a medication, which is important. It's physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And luckily, building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required. Automated deliveries and free shipping keep you on track. Plus, with Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%. You'll have access to free naturopathic doctor consults, and a Headspace meditation membership is included. And I love Headspace.
Headspace is great.
Yeah. I just do it all the time. I need to get back into it, but this might be a good reason to.
There you go.
Because that thinning might be stress-induced.
Exactly.
So maybe we just need to return to our center.
Reduce stress. Yeah. Just reduce that stress.
Exactly. So start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LIGHTSOUT. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code LIGHTSOUT. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code
Lights out. But sleepwalking usually begins 1 to 2 hours after falling asleep, right? And it generally lasts several minutes. But in some cases, it's been known to last longer. What's interesting is that sleepwalking also often runs in the family. And although not all factors are completely understood at this point, some of them include genetics, psychological stress, sleep deprivation, medications, and medical conditions. So many different factors that can play into it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be a medication, a supplement. Medications like benzodiazepines, GABA agonists like Ambien, antipsychotics, Parkinson's medications, some antibiotics, and blood pressure medications can potentially cause parasomnias. And the list goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But it's important to look at side effects of your medications because you never know.
Definitely.
According to Dr. Michelle Kramer-Bornman, out of hundreds of cases, about a third of the cases they reviewed involve the alleged influence of, you guessed it, Ambien.
Ambien, yeah.
This term Ambien zombies,
Yep.
as they've been called, can potentially begin sleepwalking, sleep eating, sleep sex, and sleep driving. I mean, I've heard wild Ambien stories.
Same. Now, I don't know if this is true. You remember Roseanne Barr?
Oh, yeah.
She said some racist crap on Twitter years ago, and then she was like, "Oh, I was on Ambien, and I didn't even know I was doing that." I always think of that one. Like,
Sleep racism.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. That's one of the side effects. But yeah, no, people cook full meals.
Sleep tweeting.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that I've ever tried Ambien
Me
before.
neither. Yeah, it scares me.
If I had it, it was like a tiny, tiny bit, but I've know people who have, and when you take enough of it, I mean, you can, just subtract a few days from your life, because it just is like a complete blur.
Yeah. And I think there's somebody in the office, but I don't want a HIPAA violation here, but I'll just say there's somebody, they were saying if you take Ambien, make sure you're like in bed, ready to go to sleep, because they think at least that it's when you take the medication, but you're not fully like going to bed or in bed, that if you're in the kitchen doing something, all of a sudden you fall asleep and then you're sleepwalking.
Yeah. So don't deep fry that chicken while you're on it. Yeah, no, it's, there's so many things though.
Yeah.
So many.
A lot
things.
of factors.
Many studies into parasomnias are relatively new in the field of sleep medicine. For example, REM, sleep behavior disorder, wasn't officially identified until 1986, but even though some of the research is fairly new, parasomnias are not rare at all. Sleep medicine specialist Carlos Schenk from SFA and a professor of psychiatry at the University of Minnesota Medical School claims that millions of Americans have some type of parasomnia.
I believe it.
I do too. Some people even climbed out of windows, driven for miles, and even had sexual affairs while sleeping. How do you explain that?
That sounds like
Baby,
a
I
good
was
cover.
sleeping though.
Yeah.
I just
Come on, man.
I went to Sarah's house.
Yeah.
She answered. I was clearly asleep.
Yeah.
She invited me in.
That's
What was
crazy.
I supposed to do? What?
Also, that seems like we're in some ethically dubious area if the other person is like, oh, they're sleepwalking.
Yeah.
And then
Can
they're
you
still
consent while sleepwalking?
I don't think you can. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Ugh.
Yeah. Ugh.
One woman apparently dreamed that she was cooking for a dinner party and woke up at 6:30 a.m. and she found her kitchen table fully set and the meal prepared,
Sweet.
that's a best case scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
While you sleep, you made your breakfast for the next morning or
That's a
dinner the
win.
next day. Table set, but you still got restful sleep.
Sweet.
I wish I could do all my chores while I was sleeping. I'd have so much more free time. If I could just like clean up all the dog poop, groom my animals, and change the litter boxes while I was also getting a rest.
That'd be great.
I'd gain so much time back in my day.
Do all your chores.
all the laundry, all the,
Now here's the
clean my
question.
garage.
Were the dishes done when she got up?
Probably not. She
Just
got
woke
the
up to a
table
mountain of
set.
dishes.
See, yeah.
Food everywhere.
There's oil and grease just all
The
over
kitchen's
the
a
kitchen.
mess.
Yeah.
Food is rotting in the fridge. Forgot to shut the door. I know in her heads we were imagining this is like flawless kitchen clean.
Yeah.
You know,
It was probably a
table set.
disaster. Yeah.
Something had to have gone wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Glass all over the floor. She
Right.
dropped a few on the way to the table.
Yeah.
Others have also been reported as having violent tendencies while sleepwalking. And forewarning, this is about an animal. It's disturbing. If you don't want to hear about animal violence, skip ahead.
Yeah. Just like 10 seconds.
One woman once woke up to find that she had gotten her cat, put it on the cutting board, and sliced it up. Oof. Terrible. Another girl had sleepwalked all the way to the top of a 130-foot crane without waking up. Dude.
That's so nuts.
Dude, her guardian angel
Yeah.
working overtime to do that. Another man had nearly snapped his wife's neck while he was dreaming of deer hunting with his hands as a weapon. I mean, it's
That
honestly
does sound like a
believable.
dream, yeah.
God.
So I actually kind of want to trigger warning about the cat, but I kind of want to bring the cat back to that first case. So I'm a cat owner, and if I was being, aggressive towards my cats like that, they would attack me. They would scratch at me. They would yell. And if that didn't wake me up, isn't it kind of also possible that your wife screaming wouldn't wake you up?
True.
Right.
I mean, doesn't that kind of help?
I don't think the sound theory really holds weight.
No.
Like you just wake up from a sound, especially if you're in that deep of a sleepwalk, right?
Seems like you can get in a deep enough sleep that nothing works. Like
Right.
you just have to wake yourself up
Right. Yeah.
whenever you transition from that phase of sleep.
Right. Exactly.
You're
yeah.
like locked in,
right.
which is also
Scary.
terrifying.
It
at the
is
same
really
time.
scary.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, but I think it kind of proves to, his point that it helps prove his innocence in a sense, anecdotally speaking, at least.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know any cat that would willfully allow you to pin them down on a cutting board
Right.
Yeah.
True.
without
True.
giving up a damn good fight.
Oh,
Right. Exactly. That's a great point. So Mark Mahold, another teammate of sleep forensics, the director of Minnesota Regional Sleep Disorder Center and a professor of neurology at the University of Minnesota Medical School, said, quote, "You don't have to extrapolate very far to connect what we see on a routine clinical basis weekly to say that if this went a little bit further, this could easily have resulted in violent or injurious behavior with legal implications." They studied the case of a man named Ron Voetley, and while sleeping, he'd race out of bed sometimes 2 times a night and snap into what they were calling just protective mode. This is kind of like what you were doing when you
I
were
was
waking
gonna
up. You
say.
thought gunshots were going off, right? So while sleeping, he perceived there were intruders in his house. He'd even grab a knife or a baseball bat and run around the house screaming while his wife and kids stayed locked away in their bedrooms. They're like, oh shit, dad's doing the
That'd
crazy
be terrifying
sleepwalking thing
though.
again. Yeah,
Oh
right?
my God.
Right? So Ron had never acted like that while he was awake. When interviewed, he said that if he had hurt his wife or one of his kids, he wouldn't have been able to live with it. And since he was so afraid of what he'd do in his sleep, he refused to own a gun. Smart. In 1989, Dr. Schenk diagnosed him with sleepwalking and sleep terrors, and then he prescribed him Klonopin, which is used to treat panic disorders. And this seemed to cure his problem. So clearly, some patients, they can be successfully treated with medication, but it's not always as simple as having a psychiatric disorder and then taking medication. It's really, you can't just say like, oh, you have a sleeping disorder, take this and you'll be fine. Back in the 1970s, it was commonly believed that all complex behaviors arising from sleep were just some form of sleepwalking. Which is funny. It just shows how far we've come into studying this. And it's kind of cool that we're in the midst of the, I guess if you want to say like golden era of like neurology with sleepwalking disorders, because it's really a fairly new thing. And for adults really in the 1970s, the stigma surrounding sleepwalking meant, they just suffered from an underlying psychiatric illness. But this has since been debunked, and Dr. Mahold and Schenk claim that psychiatrically healthy adults also have the potential to behave strangely while they sleep, which is why it's not an insanity plea or anything like that. It's non-insane automatism, which we will get into in a little bit. But as they explain it, sleep is not a, quote, whole brain phenomenon. Neurophysiological studies of sleepwalkers have shown that during sleepwalking episodes, brainwave patterns indicate a state of neither full sleep nor full wakefulness. This means that part of the brain can be awake while the other part is asleep.
Let that sink in.
What?
Your brain can be split, half asleep, half awake. The brain is, we still don't know anything.
Yeah.
So for sleepwalkers, the part of the brain that shuts down is the part that controls a person's judgment. Their eyes are open, they can observe the environment, and they can interact with things, but the main problem is that they don't consider the consequences while they're acting. They also don't feel pain, which is also called analgesia. Some sleepwalkers have gone out barefoot in the snow without waking up, even when their skin is blackening from frostbite.
Oh, man.
In another example, the SFA.
Oh, sorry. I do want to point out, we're thinking that screaming would wake someone up. If you're not being woken up by, you're walking out in snow and you're frostbitten, you can't even feel pain, right? So I think there's just weird things going on up there that we're not registering properly.
In another example, the SFA investigated a man had just gotten out of successful back surgery at the hospital, and 12 hours later, he was found dead outside, wedged between a generator and a hospital wall, 6 floors below the hospital rooftop. So the question was, had he jumped or was he pushed? Ultimately, SFA concluded the answer was neither. He was sleepwalking and walked off of the roof. But how did they figure that out? The autopsy showed that there were significant abrasions along the individual's back that indicated he fell straight down, and if he had jumped or was pushed, he wouldn't have fallen straight down. Investigators concluded he had walked upright, just straight off the ledge.
That's crazy.
He was also barefoot, meaning he had walked willingly across the roof's layer of sharp stones, and since sleepwalkers cannot sense pain, this was how SFA argued the case. SFA also clarifies that moving while asleep is not always a form of technical sleepwalking. For example, REM sleep behavior disorder, sometimes called RBD, occurs during rapid eye movement sleep, but sleepwalking occurs during the stage known as non-rapid eye movement. REM is the stage where we dream, and if you remember from our sleep paralysis episode, this also means that this is also when our body essentially paralyzes itself, or it's supposed to. It's a protective mechanism that keeps us and the people around us safe from our potential physical reactions to a dream, which I'm sure we've all had some violent dreams before.
Sure.
But Dr. Mahold and Shank reported that some people can leave the paralysis of REM sleep and then physically act out their dreams.
So not even
I want to film myself sleeping.
No, I know.
I want to know
what are we
do.
doing.
I really
there?
want to do a sleep study.
Yeah.
Now, 'cause I want to know what I'm doing while I'm sleeping.
Yeah. So it's, like the REM sleep behavior disorder, not sleepwalking. It's another layer of sleep that we're still acting things out in. So with all this said, if the part of the brain generating behaviors and actions is awake, but the part of the brain that can monitor and govern what we're doing and create memories is asleep, this is what can create really bizarre behaviors without the person being conscious. Even murder. Considering that people can act outside of their own governance and the normal procedures of sleep, this is what can lead to verdicts such as not guilty from non-insane automatism. So according to Black's Law Dictionary, automatism is defined as, quote, behavior performed in a state of mental unconsciousness or dissociation without full awareness. The term is applied to actions or conduct of an individual apparently occurring without will, purpose, or reasoned intention on his part. A condition sometimes observed in persons who, without being actually insane, suffer from an obscuration of the mental faculties, loss of volition, or of memory, or kindred affections.
And in layman's terms means?
Yeah. So basically, you're not insane. You are losing your mental faculties. You are not retaining any memories from it. And kindred affections, what they mean by that is that I think it's that your family members, you are not recognizing relationships to you, which could explain how Scott would brutally murder his wife. Is he recognizing her in this state as his wife, or is this just some entity in a dream or a sleepwalking fit that he's coming across?
Right.
Sleep forensics also acknowledge what's called a Twinkie defense, which we mentioned earlier, where there really might not be any scientific merit to the parasomnia murders, and the accused is just trying to get off the hook. I mean, I could see how this would be abused.
Why they got to go after Twinkies like that?
Yeah. I think the name does come from some Twinkie
The cream
litigation.
pastry?
Yeah, I think so. I think it actually comes from that. Actually,
I haven't had a Twinkie in a while.
yeah, Daniel, you want to look up where the name Twinkie defense comes from?
I would laugh if it was from the
I think it might be.
Little
It might
Debbie's.
be. Yeah.
or is that who makes it? No, who makes
It's
it?
Hostess.
Hostess.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
yep.
Hostess Twinkie. Used to eat those a lot as a kid.
Yeah. They're weird as an adult. They taste odd, but as a kid, I was like, this is awesome.
Well, all those taste so fake and processed.
yeah,
now.
it's like plastic.
The term Twinkie defense is an umbrella term that, in the most general sense, refers to an unconventional defensive argument, as we know. The term originated in the 1979 trial of Dan White, a San Francisco politician who was charged with first-degree murder. A testifying psychiatrist pointed out that White's consumption of sugary foods, such as Twinkies, could lead to diminished capacity.
Damn.
That's crazy. And that is a bullshit defense.
Oh,
Like,
100%.
he ate a bunch of sugar.
got a sugar high.
Yeah, that's crazy. How would that fly? So yeah, it comes from Twinkies.
Your favorite treat.
Yeah. I'm sure Hostess loved that.
Oh, I'm sure they
after,
do.
Yeah.
Like, what?
So sleep forensic scientists, they also recognize that even true parasomniacs can commit crimes while they're conscious. that is what makes it so hard to pin down. So like I could, if I know that I have a sleepwalking disorder, and then I go commit a crime, then I could be like, well, hey, look at all my family history. And my partner has seen me sleepwalk a million times. And this is, so you can kind of fabricate something just because you are a parasomniac. So in Dr. Shank's own words, quote, that's one of the major challenges for us in sleep forensics associates, to work backwards to evaluate the evidence both in favor of a sleep disorder and in favor of criminal activity. You can't assume that just because someone has a parasomnia, that's why the crime occurred. So that's kind of like what we were talking about, working backwards. You can't have that data available to you in the moment.
Yeah, because that wouldn't turn out well either, because then everybody would be trying to fake this parasomnia defense.
Yep.
While the research into parasomnias has only gained more traction in recent decades, the earliest use of a sleepwalking defense in U.S. history dates all the way back to 1845. So we're going to go back to a long, long time ago in the case against Albert Tirrell in the murder of Mary Ann Bickford. So here is that story. 22-year-old Albert was a wealthy man from Weymouth, Massachusetts, and was born in 1824. In 1845, he was married and living with his wife and 2 children, but he was known to be an unfaithful man. He was a little fuckboy back then. That year, he left his wife to be with a woman named Mary Ann, also known as Maria Bickford. Mary was married at 16 years old and was now 21, and she had escaped her husband in Maine and worked as a prostitute living in a Boston boarding house on Cedar Lane. Albert disapproved of Mary's prostitution, but she continued to work regardless, and they soon fell in love and began living together as husband and wife inside of the boarding house. Their relationship had quickly scandalized the city of Boston, and the owners of the boarding house also charged much higher rent for cohabitating unmarried couples because no, not allowed. Regardless, they were often connected at the hip and traveled together using aliases. Reportedly, they had a toxic relationship. Mary apparently told one of the other boarders that she enjoyed fighting with Albert because they had, quote, such a good time making up. And you know where that's going.
Oh, boy.
Albert was later indicted on charges of adultery on September 29, 1845, but friends and family and even his wife pleaded to the prosecutor and requested a stay of proceedings in hopes that Albert could be reformed.
No.
We can reform this fuckboy, we're sorry. His trial was then postponed for 6 months, and Albert posted bond and immediately rushed back to live with Mary at the boarding house. But their love affair would end abruptly on October 27, 1845.
So in the early morning, around 4:30 a.m., Mary was found brutally murdered. She was discovered by one of the boarding house owners who noticed smoke coming from her room. She was found lying on her back in her nightgown, nearly decapitated. The neck wound measured 6 inches long and 3 inches deep. The room was also clouded with smoke because someone had set fire to the bed and a few other pieces of furniture inside the boarding house. The presumed murder weapon, a blood-stained razor, was discovered at the foot of the bed, and Mary's hair was singed and her skin was charred. Part of one ear was split open and missing an earring, and nearby a man's vest and a cane were spattered with her blood. It's believed this was Albert's clothing, but that was not confirmed as far as I could find. Mary was last seen with Albert the previous evening, and he was immediately accused of murder. On the previous evening, Albert allegedly visited Mary's bedroom at the boarding house. He was later seen bargaining with the stable keeper, and he said he was, quote, in a scrape and needed to get away. He then drove south to a relative's house in the town of Weymouth. They hid him there and even gave him some money to flee the state. So it's important to clarify, it's unclear why he's fleeing. Some are like, it's because he's guilty of murder. Others were saying that he was fleeing the adultery charges.
Right.
He then headed into Canada and wrote his family from Montreal, announcing he had plans to sail to Liverpool, but bad weather forced the ship to return to land. He then boarded a ship in New York City bound for New Orleans, but authorities received a tip and arrested him on December 5th near Louisiana while he was aboard a vessel in the Gulf of Mexico. Newspapers in Boston had already sensationalized the crime, and many argued that Albert was guilty. Albert ended up getting a lawyer named Rufus Choate.
Dude, this guy, man.
Yeah, this is a character.
I would not want to cross this dude.
No. He's a prodigy of the law and a former United States Senator from Maine. This is funny. Rufus once spoke the longest sentence ever known to man during a speech, which was 1,219 words. I love.
Damn.
This is like,
it's like a whole page.
This is like the 1800s equivalent of going viral. Like if you want to make a newspaper headline, it's like, that guy right there, man, he said the longest sentence ever known
No
to
breath.
man. Yeah, nothing. Just forced his way through it all. His mentor was Daniel Webster, another famous lawyer and politician at the time.
Who made the dictionary?
Yeah.
It's probably wrong.
Yeah, it's a different Webster, but Daniel Webster's strategies often included exaggerated character assassination of the alleged victims and elaborate narratives. So Rufus, the prodigy, took note, and in the defense of Albert, he put together an argument that he was a chronic sleepwalker. And if he did kill Mary Bickford, he only did it because he was in a sleepwalking trance and could not be held responsible. It's believed he was inspired by a friend who had been reading a book about a sleepwalker called Sylvester Sound, the Somnambulist.
This guy's crafty.
Yeah.
Crafty
Typical
lawyer.
Yeah.
On the first day of the trial, the prosecutor called witnesses who helped establish a circumstantial case against Albert Tirrell. But there was enough doubt in the case when the medical examiner claimed that the neck wound could have been self-inflicted.
I don't know.
I don't think anybody's doing a neck wound that deep. Another witness, Mary Head, who lived near the boarding house, claimed that Albert had visited her on the morning of the murder. He rang her doorbell. When she answered, he made a gargling noise and asked her if there were some things there for him. According to Mary, she was frightened by his, quote, strange state, as if asleep or crazy. Another odd eyewitness report came from Albert's brother-in-law, Nathaniel Bailey, and he claimed that when Albert arrived in Weymouth, he said he was fleeing the adultery indictment, even though it seemed like he was fleeing the murder. When Nathaniel told Albert that Mary had been killed, Albert appeared genuinely shocked by the news. The defense began by attacking Mary's character and proposing that she might have cut her own throat. They defended Albert, saying he was an honorable and upstanding gentleman until he met Mary, and he was simply a, quote, prisoner who was, quote, spellbound. Very sound argument.
Yeah.
And after assassinating Mary's character, the defense then introduced somnambulism into their strategy. The defense even argued that Alexander the Great had even imagined a battle strategy in his sleep. Where'd they pull that out?
Yeah, I don't know.
What the hell? Then the defense called Albert's family and friends to the stand, and each of them recounted how strange he had behaved at different points in his life. Some claim he began sleepwalking at the age of 6, and the instances got worse with age. One time he forcibly grabbed his brother, pulled down curtains and smashed windows, and even yanked his cousin out of bed and threatened him with a knife. Each time he was sleepwalking, and he would speak with a shrill, trembling voice. These testimonies were then corroborated by Walter Channing, the dean of Harvard Medical School, who testified that a person in a sleepwalking state could conceivably rise in the night, dress himself, commit a murder, set a fire, and make an escape. How about that?
So even back then, they were pulling in the medical professionals into the courtroom,
And of course, from Harvard.
Yep.
I guess Harvard is in Massachusetts, so makes sense, but
it's close by.
convenient for them.
Yeah. So Rufus Choate then argued during a 6-hour speech, 6 hours, that
One
nobody
sentence.
saw, never took a breath, that nobody saw Albert kill the victim, fair. Nobody saw him near the boarding house around the time of the murder, also fair. Nobody saw him with blood on him, and he had never confessed. Albert also had no apparent motive. Rufus then, which I don't know, he kind of seems like circumstantially like there was a motive. It was an adultery charge, and he's living with this woman who's not his wife. It seems like contextually there
Could
might
Mary
be,
possibly testify against him?
yeah, something like that. Rufus then emphasized the sleepwalking argument and stressed that 12 witnesses had testified to Albert's condition. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and returned with a verdict of not guilty. This seems like maybe there's some privilege at play here, that he's a man. And
I wish so bad we could see this play out in person.
it would be kind of funny, right?
Like,
this seems like an unfair trial here.
it was a different time.
Yeah, different time. And the fact that it's like really, compared to the medical tech and science that we have today compared to back then, it's like, as long as you could convince the jury and be Rufus Choate and very, very influential for 6 hours, kind of wear them down. But spectators then got to their feet and applauded.
Yeah, what the fuck is that? Yeah, like
Albert began to sob, which was his first display of emotion throughout the entire trial.
It's like, I can't believe this. Got off with this.
Rufus then used the same defense in the next trial to acquit Albert on the arson charges.
Oh.
For setting fire to the boarding house, which also is like, seems like he's trying to cover up the evidence. That's why he was setting the fires inside. But this is funny. Albert later sent Rufus a letter asking for a refund for half of his legal fees because it had been too easy to persuade the jury of his innocence.
Ooh.
His lawyer never refunded him. Albert went on to live the remainder of his life in obscurity, but his trial will go down in history as the first case in the U.S. that successfully used a sleepwalking defense, or what was once called, quote, insanity of sleep. In the 1840s, there were virtually no medical explanations for sleepwalking, and medical experts had argued over its cause.
Which, hence the Twinkie defense.
Yep. Yeah. And I think this kind of sets the tone, right?
It
this
does.
Is like
and I'm sure prosecutors either know this from law school or they go and look into it.
Yeah.
Like, seems like a bunch of bullshit to me, so I get it. But
yeah. That's why I do think medical science has since kind of changed the face of this defense quite a lot.
Well, the fact that we actually understand the sleep cycles now,
right,
helps a lot. And there's a lot more, obviously, data and studies going on. But over the years, many cases that have used the sleepwalking defense have failed. Many lead to a conviction, but another strange, almost unbelievable case with a more legitimate argument for a sleepwalking defense involved a 24-year-old Canadian man named Kenneth Parks and his in-laws in 1987 in Toronto area of Ontario. According to Kenneth, the last thing he remembered on the night of May 24th, 1987, was falling asleep to an episode of SNL. He then experienced strange flashing images like in a dream. He saw his mother-in-law with a panicked look on her face. And then next he was yelling, "Kids, kids," trying to warn them about something. The next was just the sound of a phone beeping off the hook, and all of a sudden he was awake in his car with a bloody knife next to him in the passenger seat. Kenneth then drove to the closest police station at 4:15 a.m. and he blurted out, quote, "I just killed 2 people. I've just killed my mother and father-in-law. I stabbed and beat them to death. It's all my fault." Police also noticed that Kenneth appeared completely unaware of the fact that he had severed the tendons in both of his hands.
Ugh.
The police then detained him and raced over to his in-laws' house in Scarborough, which was 14 miles from Kenneth's home. At the in-laws' townhouse, police found Kenneth's father-in-law, Dennis Woods, barely alive. He'd been strangled until he fell unconscious and also stabbed in the back and the head with a kitchen knife. As for Dennis's wife, Barbara Woods, she was found dead after being bludgeoned with a tire iron and also stabbed 5 times with a kitchen knife.
An hour later, Kenneth's wife, Karen, got a visit from police saying that her mother had been murdered and her husband, Kenneth, was the suspect. This didn't make any sense to her. She had known Kenneth for 6 years and not once had he ever shown violent tendencies. Plus, he had always gotten along with their parents and they had a close relationship. Kenneth and Karen first met when Karen was in high school and Kenneth was 20. It's unclear exactly how old Karen was at the time. But at this time, Karen was often rebelling against her parents and their relationship was constantly strained. But Kenneth was actually the one who encouraged her to reconcile her relationship with her parents, especially her mother. Despite the age difference between Kenneth and Karen, her parents accepted him into the family. Kenneth had come from a broken home and had seen Karen's family like, quote unquote, the Brady Bunch, and the family he always wished he had. He was always particularly fond of Barbara, who was his future mother-in-law. Kenneth and Karen then married, and within 2 years, they bought a car and put down a payment on a house. Everything seemed to be going fairly well until the night in question. So when Karen finally brought herself to visit Kenneth in jail, she tried to get any answer she could from him. Kenneth had no explanation for any of it, and Karen left angry and confused, as you can imagine, and Kenneth was later charged with the second-degree murder of Barbara Woods and the attempted murder of Dennis Woods. That was initially a first-degree murder charge, but they knocked it down later to a second degree.
Kenneth's grandmother hired him one of the best criminal lawyers in Canada and one of the first female lawyers in the country, Marlis Edward. And we actually found a clip of Marlis Edward, and here's some of her thoughts on the case.
He was deeply sad, tearful, and he was very clear that he did not remember. He did not understand what had happened. He did not know if he was responsible for the death of his mother-in-law and the severe stabbing of and wounding of his father-in-law. So really all he could say in the most compelling of ways was, I'm confused, I'm frightened, I don't know why I'm here, I've damaged my hands, and his hands were very badly injured by obviously handling a knife of some kind, and I don't know what happened.
Marlis Edward then contacted Dr. Ronald Billings, an expert in forensic psychiatry, and according to Dr. Billings, he reported that Kenneth was depressed over what had happened. He found no evidence of delusional thinking. He didn't have an aggressive personality, a personality disorder, or antisocial behavior, and he was not a psychopath. Kenneth at one point had even been given the nickname the Gentle Giant, and for the prosecution, it seemed like an open and shut case. Kenneth's father-in-law, Dennis, identified Kenneth during the attack, and the murder weapon was found in Kenneth's car. Not only that, but they had his confession in the police station. But just like in the Scott Falatar case, no one could find a motive. So here's some more of Marlis Edward explaining how they plan to build an argument for the defense.
I looked to some external circumstances that would give clues. And one of them is the absence of any motive. I mean, there was no insurance policy, there was no money, there's no anger, and you can't find a reason. And we found, I think, a clue, and a very important clue that started to move us in direction of exploring sleep disorders. When we received from the Crown a copy of his statement to the police. In our law, we provide for, and it's rarely been successful, a defense of non-insane automatism. Sleepwalking is one variety of that. We knew we had to put forward a thorough and exhaustive case, one that would convince a rational person so that, they wouldn't walk away saying, this is ridiculous, this is incredible. It had to be, enough evidence that 12 ordinary people in the community would look at it and say, this is the only explanation.
While his defense moved toward making the argument for sleepwalking, Marlis received feedback from her colleagues that the claim was ridiculous and far-fetched. The key would be convincing a jury, which would be extremely difficult. Nevertheless, Marlis pushed on and came across the neurophysiologist in Ottawa, Dr. Roger Broughton, the same expert who had later testified during the Scott Falatar case.
So Marlis then got permission from the courts to set up a temporary sleep lab in a parole office where Dr. Broughton could study Kenneth while he slept. Allowing Kenneth to undergo sleep studies and have his case reviewed by multiple sleep experts would monumentally change the course of this trial. Technicians monitored his brainwaves, eye movements, muscle tone, and blood oxygen levels as he slept. So here's Dr. Broughton explaining these sleep studies.
There are two qualitatively different types of sleep. The first type we refer to usually as non-REM sleep or synchronized sleep or sometimes quiet sleep. And the other type we refer to as rapid eye movement sleep or REM sleep, also called paradoxical sleep and active sleep. There are significant differences between these two types of sleep, which are really as different from each other as either is from wakefulness. In normal subjects, when we study their sleep, they very rarely go from the deepest stages of non-REM sleep, from what we've called slow wave sleep, to wakefulness. It's quite rare.
So as they monitored Kenneth, he fell asleep and quickly reached level 4 or deep sleep. Then he suddenly woke up without moving through any of the other levels of sleep. One or two instances of this behavior is apparently common for many people, but in Kenneth's study, this happened 4 times, which was completely out of the ordinary. And according to Dr. Brown, this is commonly seen in sleepwalkers. As they looked into Kenneth's family history, his maternal grandfather was also a recurring sleepwalker. The man would cook full meals and grunt through the process. His family knew not to wake him during his cooking or he would quickly become violent. And once he woke up, Kenneth's grandfather could never remember any of it. So Kenneth's mother was also reportedly a sleepwalker, and Kenneth himself had sleepwalking incidents as a child. As early as 6 years old, Kenneth had tried to climb out of a 6-story window in his sleep. It was also reported that he had even gone grocery shopping while sleeping. So during Kenneth's sleep test, Dr. Browden also discovered Kenneth had other sleep disorders that were commonly found with sleepwalking, including sleep terrors, sleep talking, and a pattern of very deep sleep. He was also a deep sleeper and had difficulty waking up. Besides his family history and his own history with sleepwalking, other factors like stress and exhaustion might have contributed to the incident, and the defense used this in their argument. One weekend, about a year before the attack, Kenneth and Karen had gone on a double date to the Queen's Plate, which is Canada's oldest thoroughbred horse race. Kenneth bet on a horse and won $45, and knowing that they had dreamed about vacationing to Australia, he figured he would keep playing the horses until he had enough for a vacation.
This is when his gambling addiction began, and for the next year, he placed bets on horse races until he started losing significantly. He even began stealing small amounts of money over time from his employer to cover his losses. He had worked nearly 10-hour days as a project coordinator for Revere Electric, and in the end, he had embezzled about $30,000. He was caught, fired, and charged with fraud, and he even spent a night in jail. But Karen and his in-laws, Dennis and Barbara Woods, supported him through it all. He also began attending gambling support groups, but unfortunately, no one wanted to hire him after the embezzlement for obvious reasons. Meanwhile, Karen was also pregnant with their first child, and with the growing financial stress, he lied to Karen and claimed that he had gotten a job, but really he was betting on horse races again, hoping he would hit it big and be able to support his family and repay his former employer. He then borrowed money from loan sharks and stole money from Karen's bank account. The family's finances dwindled while Karen gave birth to their child. 3 days before the murder, Kenneth's stress levels shot through the roof when one of Karen's checks bounced. She assumed it was a mistake, so she visited her bank where they showed her several check receipts with her signature on them. And she realized that Kenneth had been forging checks. And when she returned home, an argument ensued and she forced Kenneth to sleep on the couch. And that night, he didn't get any sleep. The next day, Karen discovered Kenneth had been lying about having a job, and because of the loan sharks, they were in more debt than she had ever realized. She was obviously very pissed off with him and began worrying that Karen was going to take their newborn and leave him for good. Again, he couldn't sleep that night. On Saturday, the day before the murders, Kenneth had been awake for about 48 hours straight. He then played rugby, hoping the exercise would be enough to finally get him some sleep. And later that evening, Karen returned home, and Kenneth expected to be served divorce papers. Instead, she told him the plan was to sell their house, repay his former employer, and start over. Which he was absolutely shocked by her mercy, but he agreed. And he knew that he would have to confess to his in-laws about what had been happening, which added even more stress to the situation. He feared that all the love and respect they had built over the years would be gone, but he figured that was the price he had to pay for his poor actions. That night, Karen asked if Kenneth was coming up to bed, and he insisted on sleeping on the couch until he could make amends and move forward. He finally fell asleep that night to an episode of SNL after being awake for nearly 60 hours. With the mounting stress and exhaustion, along with the family history of sleepwalking, Kenneth was in a state where he was highly likely to sleepwalk. But the defense was worried whether or not they would convince the jury that Kenneth drove 14 miles along a highway and committed an intricate murder and assault against his in-laws while sleepwalking. The defense argued that since Kenneth had gone to sleep with anxiety about the next day, when he was planning to come clean to his in-laws over dinner at their house, that he might have began sleepwalking as if he was carrying out the next day's events. And this is possibly what led him to his in-laws' house in the middle of the night. He had also driven the route hundreds of times before. The defense also noted that he had left the house without socks or underwear and left the front door to his house wide open, two things which he had never done before. Seemed pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Not only leaving the front door open, but going to your in-laws with no socks or underwear.
Yeah. And And it also makes sense with the routine thing, like kind of how we were talking about with Scott, where he's like, I have to go fix the pool. So he's doing this in his sleepwalking. Same argument here with Kenneth, where it's like, I know I have to go to my in-laws tomorrow and confess what's been going on. So maybe that was his prerogative while he was asleep. So during the trial, certain aspects of the case were unclear. So the defense tried their best to fill in the gaps. No one could explain how Kenneth entered the victim's house. Once inside, it was argued that Barbara, confused by seeing her son-in-law in her house at 4 a.m., tried to physically get his attention, and this is common for people to do with sleepwalkers, but this might have initiated Kenneth's violence while sleepwalking. Then she might have tried to use the telephone and tried to grab the kitchen knife in self-defense. Then Kenneth possibly attempted to take the kitchen knife from her, blade first, which would explain the deep wounds to the tendons in his hands. Dennis Woods, according to his testimony, first woke up with Kenneth choking him, and he testified that he couldn't remember Kenneth saying anything before passing out. So we really don't even have Dennis as like an eyewitness to anything going on in the house. After Kenneth murdered Barbara, the unnamed children who were relatives in the house might have come to check out the commotion. They testified they heard Kenneth making grunting noises, similar to how his grandfather sounded while cooking in his sleep. At some point, Kenneth returned to his vehicle and left. So if you remember the flashing images and what he was kind of seeing, it was Barbara's face concerned, then him telling the kids to like get out of here, and the phone being off the hook. So trying to piece together like why he would see those flashing images specifically. According to the defense, this is when he came to, when he had left in his vehicle. 5 neurological experts testified that Kenneth was sleepwalking during the time of the incident, and he was not suffering from any kind of neurological or psychiatric illness. The prosecution failed to find any sleep experts who disagreed. But they argued that the time that had elapsed during Kenneth's alleged sleepwalking episode was much longer than most documented sleepwalking incidents, which is typically less than 30 minutes, sometimes only a few minutes at most. Plus, several witnesses inside the local police station heard him confess to murder. The prosecution proposed that Kenneth might have created a motivation for killing his in-laws while awake, so he would commit the murder in his sleep. It was like, what? But according to Dr. Broughton, he said, quote, "There's no evidence that one can create a motivation in wakefulness as a sleepwalker in a way that would carry over in sleepwalking." On top of all this, Dennis Woods, the man who was attacked and whose wife was murdered, testified for the defense. He reiterated that Kenneth had a great relationship with them and there wasn't any tension between them before the attack. Before deliberation, the judge proposed 3 questions to the jury. 1, did Kenneth cause the death of Barbara Woods? 2, if he did, were the acts causing the death conscious and voluntary? 3, if the acts were not conscious and voluntary, what crime was committed? Those are great questions. The jury deliberated for 9 hours, and in the end, they found Kenneth Parks not guilty. He dodged a life sentence in prison. His attempted murder charge was also dismissed, and Judge Watt agreed, ruling that the state had failed to establish, quote, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Kenneth Parks was aware of his actions. And since he wasn't judged to be insane either, since the sleepwalking defense is specifically not an insanity defense, he was not required to attend a psychiatric hospital, although he did get treated for his sleep disorder on his own. After leaving the courtroom, Kenneth then appeared before a district court judge and pled guilty to the previous fraud charges, and he received a 3-month suspended sentence.
This case is so, it's similar, but it's also different in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
From the Scott Falatar's case. Because it's just like, I mean, this guy stressed for one on a whole other level. But then just the prior history that's there.
Prior history, also like leaving the front door open, no underwear, no socks. I think that's a big one.
His hands being
cut
up to the point that the tendons are severed.
Yeah.
I mean, it is hard to believe that he was sleepwalking for this long, but if there was somebody who was going to break the norm, I feel like it would be him.
If he's going grocery shopping by himself, that's not going to be a few minutes.
And they have family members that are cooking in their sleep. I mean, this seems like whether it's genetic or it's some type of, I don't know.
Yeah, they do say sleepwalking is passed down. Like if you have it in your family history, that's a big sign that you'll probably sleepwalk as well.
And then obviously 5 neurological experts who are all unanimous, and we believe he was sleepwalking.
And the prosecution could not find an expert to go against those. So
yeah, a lot stacked in his favor with this. But in the aftermath of the not guilty verdict, an appeal was brought to the Canadian Supreme Court, which upheld Kenneth's acquittal. And there were questions on the, quote, criminal automatism defense. The Supreme Court document read, "The failure to prove that the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt in accordance with such principles will result in an acquittal." That is exactly what has happened in this case. The respondent has been acquitted in accordance with ordinary criminal law principles. And Chief Justice Antonio Lamer found that the trial judge was correct in his analysis of the evidence and his decision not to characterize sleepwalking as a mental disorder. Part of me is like, this is Canada, though.
True.
But I don't think that necessarily would change the way that this case would have gone.
Yeah, because I mean, it's kind of the same with the U.S. law. It's like beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And then also with sleepwalking not being characterized as a mental disorder, we also do that here. So it's not that different. I mean, maybe culturally they have a different idea on this, or maybe they're just more receptive to these types of like very weird, nuanced discussions on sleepwalking. Maybe they're more open to it.
It seems like they really looked at the evidence and really looked at all of the information that they were given. It wasn't just like the prosecutors just like, I want to get a conviction in this, so let's shoot for the, death penalty here.
Right.
And, go as hard as we possibly can to just convict him no matter what. But they really looked at all the different factors here. Even Kenneth's wife, Karen, had been convinced that he was innocent. And after the trial, they reconciled their relationship. But after 4 years, they did get divorced. Reportedly, Kenneth Parks remarried, fathered 5 more children, and later ran for school trustee in Durham in 2006, where his children went to school. Locals were concerned with the previous murder charge from 20 years before, but many more were concerned with the proven embezzling from his employer and gambling addiction. His whereabouts today are unknown. But in the aftermath of Kenneth Parks' case, many have reconsidered the sleepwalking and the, quote, non-insane automatism defense. Kenneth's case is taught in nearly every law school in Canada, and many might find the idea ridiculous, but the field of sleep forensics has been growing throughout the years and uncovering more about the bizarre scenarios that can arise from sleepwalking. Many are concerned that if a sleepwalking defense results in an acquittal, should that mean the person goes free without any repercussions or mandatory treatment? Canadian college professor Dr. Mayer Krieger, in an article titled Sleep Medicine and the Law, warned, if someone commits a crime, they shouldn't mean they're off the hook. They need to be treated to try to prevent it from happening again. One question is a legal one, whether the person should go to jail or not. The other is the fear that the person might do something similar again. What if they do something in jail?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I think even if you are not guilty by non-insane automatism, it does feel like there should be a little caveat, a little asterisk on that law to be like, but you have to go get treated for this, right?
At the very least, I feel like they should also go and agree to be studied and, try to further the science on this. Especially somebody lost their life here. So if we can try to prevent this from happening in the future or learn more about what's going on with sleepwalking, then
right.
So it's a small price to pay.
Yeah.
It definitely beats being in prison, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that they should mandate something.
Yeah. Luckily in the 2 cases, at least, Scott and Kenneth, they both did get their sleep disorders checked out and they worked through it. So at least they did that kind of on their own volition. I guess it's something, right?
But at the end of the day, do you think sleepwalking defense is legit?
I do. I think it should be incredibly hard to prove or to get a jury to agree on, because it is such a crazy defense to propose that. So it should be difficult, but I do think there should be, I think it should be legitimate. I think it should be used when applicable. I could see how people would abuse it though.
Yeah. Or, I know there's other cases where if you, like, let's say your daughter was murdered by her boyfriend and her boyfriend claims the sleepwalking defense.
Sure.
Are you going to feel differently about that than, say, if it was within your own family,
I mean, yes, just by the nature of being so close to something like that, but that's also why I'm not on the jury, right?
Yeah.
So I would hope that, God, that would be an incredibly difficult situation to be in, but I would hope that, I don't know. In the case like we saw, Dennis Woods, he came to testify for Kenneth. He's like, this man murdered my wife, but I'm still here to defend him because he has had no reason to do something like this.
But if you didn't know them as well as Dennis knew Kenneth, you know what I mean? You didn't know this boy and, he's claiming that, I was sleepwalking. Again, I think it really comes down to the facts of the case and what, understanding the health and behavior of and history of his past with sleepwalking, things like that.
That's why I said it should be very hard to convince.
It should be very
on
hard.
this,
It should
right?
be very, very convincing.
Yeah.
For it to work. There's always the fear that people will try to abuse it, claim I have parasomnias and
which we see the insanity defense too, right?
Yeah,
people
exactly.
try and pull that one all the time
but
as
it
well.
rarely works
Mhm.
in their favor. So yeah, I think it should. I mean, if you are not conscious when you commit a murder, especially as horrible and tragic as that is, should you be held to the same level of liability as somebody who did this consciously?
Right. No.
That would just be a scary world to live in, right? Especially knowing what the brain is capable of. But you damn sure should be able to back it up. And
Absolutely.
experts should be able to come to your defense and be like, yeah, this person, you know.
And I think in the case of Kenneth Parks, it was like, we had 5 experts come in. They all unanimously agreed that he was sleepwalking during this scenario. And the prosecution couldn't find anybody to say differently. I think that's a pretty strong case there.
I agree. And I mean, I think the most important thing is we just got to keep studying the brain, and
I agree.
neuroscience needs to continue to
Seriously.
advance, and hopefully technology can assist us in understanding the brain more and why this happens, and be able to measure it a little bit better. So it's not just like expert opinions, but rather we should
have some data.
We have a way to pinpoint somehow. I don't know. Don't ask me how I figured that out, because I don't know shit, but
I think more of a more preventative approach here is just go get your sleep disorders worked through. Go see a professional and do something about this, because clearly you just never know. I don't think the case of Kenneth, do you ever think that it crossed his mind that he could do something like this?
Well, and just stress in general.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people commit crimes because they're stressed about something?
Yeah.
So it's just, I think stress is kind of the underlying issue of which we all battle it daily, but finding ways to mitigate that stress and reduce it the best that you can definitely helps. But yeah, at the very least, if you're struggling with a sleep disorder, or you think you might be, just talk to your doctor about it.
Yeah.
Because chances are, your doctor will refer you to a sleep specialist who can do a sleep study on you.
Right.
And I know with insurance, the way that it is, it doesn't always cover it, and it can be expensive. I've heard some crazy prices on sleep studies, but at least talk to your doctor about it if you think you might have it. And, when talking about some of the things I experienced in the past, I did talk to my doctor about it, and they did recommend I take a sleep study, but for snoring was what it was. But the sleep tears and stuff like that resolve themselves pretty soon after that because stress just went down with time. But I think I was massively stressed out with my situation at the time. That's what was causing it. And as time went on, because I don't have sleep terrors anymore or anything. I don't think I have really any parasomnias at this point, unless falling asleep on my limbs is a parasomnia, but maybe. But yeah, super interesting. I mean, what do you think, Danny? You think sleepwalking is a legitimate defense?
I mean, like I said earlier, I think Scott was innocent, and I do think it's a legitimate defense. I'm probably on the same line as Austin, where it's going to be extremely rare for it to be, legitimate, and it's going to get abused, and it's going to be insanely hard to prove. But I do believe that it's real. There's science to back it up, unlike a lot of the other things that I'm very,
Are you talking about the paranormal?
I was going to bring it up, but yeah, there's science to back it up.
So you would believe somebody who, it'd be easier to believe somebody with a sleepwalking defense than somebody's like, I was possessed by a demon when I did this.
I think it depends on the evidence to back it up. If they have no history of sleepwalking, that'd be a little difficult.
Which, and again, in devil made me do it cases, usually there's some psychiatric thing that could be that comes up that you could point to in those cases. But yeah, the sleep phenomenon is so interesting. I could talk about sleep all day. In fact, I want to go sleep right now.
Yeah.
This was a long episode. If you're still awake, hey, we're done. But yeah, no, we want to know your thoughts on this. Let us know if you've had any, if you have any crazy parasomnias or experience with sleepwalking. Drop it in the comments. Let us know about it. And also if there's any other cases, sleepwalking cases you want us to take a look at in the future, because I'm sure we dive back into
there's
this
plenty
topic.
more. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's definitely
there.
more. I know there's a famous documentary on a case that we kind of alluded to at the beginning.
Yeah, I think Randy Herman Jr. or something. I think that's his name. Yeah.
Maybe we revisit that at some point. But yeah, let us know your thoughts. And then before we go, I did want to just make a quick announcement. But if you enjoy the video version of this podcast, I just want to let you know that from now on, the only place to enjoy the video version of the podcast will be on YouTube. And before you start cussing me out in the comments, let me explain why. So basically, Spotify has been working to become a YouTube competitor. And, I started the show on YouTube many years ago, and YouTube's always been our home. And, going forward and kind of with some other agreements that we have with, our basically RSS hoster, and they sell all of our ad spaces for the show Audio Boom. We are not able to push the video to Spotify anymore, and also just because of it was affecting the YouTube channel quite a bit in a negative way. And so the best way to support the show going forward, if you want to watch the show, is on YouTube. Links are below. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, come over, hang out with us. We do a live premiere for the episode every Friday, so you can come hang out, chat with us, and watch the show with everybody else, which is always a good time. But the audio will still be on Spotify, so you can still listen to it. Same as always, it's still there, and we love Spotify for all you audio listeners, and so it'll still be there. No worries, but video is on YouTube. But thank you guys for hanging out with us. We will see you guys next week back in the paranormal realm.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Which will be good. It's been a little while. So we'll see you then. Till then, lights out, everybody.